Hey guys, tonight we travel far beneath the glittering surface of the Roman Empire, beneath its marble temples, its bustling forums, and its grand baths, into the hidden darkness where the empire's wealth was truly made. Beneath the mountains and deserts of Rome's vast dominion lay the mines, places of endless labor, of dim light and stale air, where men and women chipped away at stone for the gold, silver, salt, and copper that kept the empire's economy shining. This is not the story of emperors or generals, though their shadows reach even here, but of the countless invisible workers who carved out Rome as fortune, one strike of the pickaxe at a time. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're retuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you listen, let your breath slow. Imagine the cool air of an underground tunnel, the soft sound of water dripping in the dark. You are safe, warm, and at rest, merely a visitor to the past. We will move slowly, quietly, through history's depths. Tonight's journey begins with what it truly meant to work in a Roman mine, to live and labor in darkness for an empire that rarely noticed you existed. Imagine waking before dawn in a landscape that never truly feels alive. The camp is silent, except for the faint clatter of chains and the sound of rough sandals on gravel. The air smells faintly of smoke from last night's fires, mixed with dust, a dryness that catches in the back of your throat before you've even spoken a word. You rise slowly, muscles stiff from the cold, from the endless crouching and lifting. Around you, men and boys stir, some slaves, some prisoners, some free workers, desperate for a wage. There is little difference between them here. Once you step into the tunnels, the darkness swallows every name, every status, every story. A world below ground. The Roman mines were vast and varied. In Spain, men dug deep for silver, bright, precious metal that glittered in the light of the empire's coins. In Dacia and Gaul, they sought gold. In the deserts of Egypt, they carved salt from the earth, a mineral so essential that soldiers were once paid in it. Salarium, from which we take the word salary. But the conditions, no matter the place, were almost always the same. The tunnels were narrow and low, often too tight to stand upright. The walls dripped with moisture, and the air was thick, heavy with dust and the faint metallic scent of ore. Oil lamps provided light, but only just enough to see the next few feet. The flame flickered constantly, its smoke curling against the stone ceiling, leaving black stains like soot tattoos marking the passage of men who would never see daylight again. The sound was ceaseless, the soft thud of pickaxes, the scrape of shovels, the muffled cough of a miner deep within the tunnels. Sometimes you could hear the faint groan of the earth itself, as though the mountains resented being hollowed out. You would carry tools that were simple and brutal: an iron pick, a wooden wedge, a hammer. There were no machines, no pulleys that spared the back. Everything was done by hand. The rhythm of the work was slow and monotonous. Strike, chip, lift, carry, return, the same motion repeated until it became its own kind of prayer. The taste of dust and time, the air, deep underground, was damp, yet suffocating. It clung to your lungs, filling them with dust that settled like sand at the bottom of a jar. You learned to breathe through your mouth, shallow and quiet, conserving what little air remained. Water dripped constantly from cracks in the rock, leaving mineral trails that glimmered faintly in lamplight. Sometimes the tunnels flooded, and the workers had to dig trenches to guide the water away, not for comfort, but for survival. The Roman engineers who designed these mines were clever and efficient, but their concern was for output, not endurance. If the tunnels collapsed, new workers were brought in. If men died, others took their place. Imagine the slow awareness that crept over you day after day, that your life might end here, quietly, without anyone ever knowing. There would be no tombstone, no name remembered in marble. Only another sealed shaft, another ghost in the dark. Life at the surface. At midday, workers would be allowed to emerge for food. A thick porridge made from barley, sometimes mixed with scraps of salted meat or a few olives if the overseers were generous. They would sit on the ground in silence, blinking in the sudden sunlight, their eyes watering. The brightness of the surface world felt strange, too sharp, too pure after hours below. For some, it was unbearable. They would squint, shielding their faces, and eat quickly before returning to the familiar dark. The overseers, Veliti Metallorum, watched everything. Fear itself was enough to maintain order. The mine was its own kind of prison. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Sometimes, when work was slow or ran thin, the punishments grew harsher. Workers might be forced to dig longer hours, sometimes through the night. The lamps would burn low, casting long shadows that seemed to breathe with the air. You would lose track of time entirely, not knowing whether it was dawn or dusk above, only that the air felt colder the deeper you went. The faces of the forgotten not. Everyone in the mines was a slave. Some were convicts damnati ad matala, men sentenced to labor for crimes, real or imagined. Others were debtors, captured rebels, or prisoners of war. A few were free laborers, lured by promises of pay that never quite matched the risk. But underground, all of them shared the same fate. Hair matted with dust, skin streaked with soot, hands calloused to the point of numbness. The rhythm of the pick was the same, whether you were born in Rome or stolen from Dacia. Some of the workers were children. Their small size allowed them to crawl through narrow seams of rock where grown men could not fit. They carried baskets of ore on their backs, their feet bare, their movements practiced and silent. They learned early to avoid coughing, to conserve air, to avoid attention. Their lives were short, but they knew nothing else. Echoes of the empire's greed. Very ounce of gold. Every bar of silver, every block of salt, carried from these mines, fed the veins of empire. Coins struck with the emperor's face. Baths lined with marble, dusted in gold leaf. Feasts illuminated by lamps, fueled by oil, refined in the same fire that burned underground. Rome glimmered with wealth. Below, the earth swallowed lives whole. And yet, the two worlds were connected, the darkness and the light, the luxury and the labor, each depending on the other in perfect, terrible balance. If you listen closely, perhaps you can still hear it, the slow, rhythmic sound of picks against stone echoing through centuries. The heartbeat of an empire built on silence. Now, as we leave the tunnels behind, let us rise gently toward the surface of history, to the world of emperors, of power, and of ambition. For above every miner's suffering stood a ruler, one who expanded Rome to its greatest reach, and whose victories glittered with the wealth those miners supplied. Let us meet him next, the Emperor Trajan. As the light of dawn breaks over the Roman world, we move from the darkness of the mines to the brightness of power. Above the laborers, the merchants, and the soldiers stood one man, an emperor whose vision and ambition expanded Rome further than it had ever gone before. His name was Marcus Ulpius Traianus. You may know him simply as Trajan, the soldier and bridgers, roads, and triumphal columns. But behind the gleaming marble statues and the triumphant titles was another kind of story, one of constant motion, of restless command, of decisions that would stretch the empire and the people beneath it to their very limits. Let us take a slow walk through his life, from his beginnings in the provinces to his final days far from home. A provincial beginning. Imagine a small Roman town under the warm sun of Hispania, the land we now call Spain. The air is thick with the scent of olive trees and dust. This is where Trajan was born, in the year 53 CE, to a family of Italian settlers who had made their fortunes in the provinces. He was not born in the heart of Rome, but at its edge, a man of the frontier who would come to understand both its vastness and its fragility. His father, also named Marcus Ulpius Traianus, was a successful general and administrator. From him, the young Trajan learned discipline, duty, and the art of command. It was a world built on structure and order, a world where the empire's survival depended on the obedience of its soldiers and the exploitation of its lands. Even as a boy, Trajan would have known that Rome's wealth, aqueducts, quays, and palaces came from the toil of men far beneath the surface of its prosperity. Gold and silver flowed from the mines of Hispania, not far from where he was born. Perhaps, even then, the young Trajan watched the caravans of ore-laden mules passing by and wondered at the price of such brilliance. The soldier, S-Path Trajan's early career was that of a soldier, a commander forged in the slow rhythm of military life. He spent years in the provinces, drilling his men, building fortifications, and learning the temperament of both the legions and the lands they occupied. You can imagine him standing in a cold dawn mist along the Rhine frontier, the smell of wet leather and iron filling the air, his voice calm, giving quiet orders to the soldiers around him. He was known for his steadiness, his fairness, and his endurance. He did not command through cruelty, as some emperors had done, but through the example of his own resolve. Over time, his reputation grew, a leader who could be trusted, a man who neither wasted lives nor shrank from battle. Rome was watching. The rise to power when the emperor, Nerva, an older and childless ruler, sought a successor who could unite the army and the Senate, he turned to Trajan. In the year 97 CE, Trajan was adopted as Nerva's heir, a decision that would change the course of the empire. A year later, upon Nerva's death, Trajan became emperor. Imagine the ceremony, the air filled with incense, the Senate gathered in solemn ranks, the crowd outside murmuring the emperor's new name, Imperator, Caesar, Nerva, Traianus, Augustus. He was already a soldier, but now he was also the guardian of peace, the father of the empire, and the embodiment of its strength. Under his rule, Rome entered what many would later call its golden age. But even golden ages are paid for by unseen hands. The expansion of the empire. Trajan was not content with stability alone. He dreamed of expansion, of pushing the empire's borders to their furthest possible reach. His campaigns in Dacia, the land we now know as Romania, brought immense wealth into Roman coffers. It was Dacia that held the mines, rich veins of gold that would fund Trajan's grand projects and adorn the temples of Rome. But before the wealth could flow, there was war. 2 long grueling campaigns were fought in the steep mountains of that land, where forests hid fierce warriors and narrow passes became deadly traps. When, at last, Dacia fell, the victory was celebrated with unmatched spectacle. In the heart of Rome, a monumental column was raised, Trajan's column, its surface spiraling upward with carved scenes of conquest, soldiers marching, bridges built, fortresses stormed, each panel a frozen moment of triumph and suffering. Look closely at those carvings, and you can still see them, the miners, the laborers. The enslaved captives set to work, carrying out the spoils of victory. Their figures are small, almost hidden among the soldiers and emperors. But they are there. The silent continuity between battle and labor, conquest and extraction. The builder emperor with Dacia's wealth flowing into Rome, Trajan turned to building. Under his rule, the city transformed. He commissioned aqueducts, roads, and public buildings of staggering scale and precision. The Forum of Trajan, with its libraries, basilica, and markets, was the largest complex of its kind ever built. If you walk through the ruins today, you can almost hear it, the echo of footsteps on marble, the murmur of voices reading from scrolls in the libraries, the distant ring of hammers from workshops filled with bronze and stone. All of it powered, in some way, by the gold and silver mined in Dacia and Hispania. The empire's foundations, quite literally, glittered with the labor of the forgotten, the emperor's burden. Yet, for all his triumphs, Trajan's life was not one of rest. He was constantly in motion, inspecting roads, leading campaigns, overseeing the logistics of empire. He ate simply, drank little, and spent much of his reign traveling from one frontier to the next. He was, in many ways, still a soldier at heart, never entirely at home in Rome itself. His final campaign into the distant lands of Parthia was his most ambitious, a vast journey eastward that stretched his armies and his strength to the limit. By then, age and illness had begun to weigh on him. Far from the marble of Rome, he fell ill in Cilicia, in modern-day Turkey. In the year 117 CE, he never returned to the city that bore his column, Ka. He died on the journey home, his body carried across the sea, Ka. His ashes were placed at the base of his column in Rome, a fitting symbol of his reign. Resting above the carved spiral that told his story, surrounded by the scenes of the empire he built. Legacy and reflection, Trajan is remembered as one of the good emperors, a ruler of justice, of moderation, of strength tempered by reason. Even later emperors, like Hadrian, would be measured against his example. But history has a quieter side, and it whispers through the cracks of monuments. For every column raised, thousands of hands toiled unseen. For every empire that glittered, countless lives dimmed in the dark. The mines that funded Trajan's glory, the tunnels deepened, the walls grew slick with sweat and time, and the rhythm of work, that endless, echoing rhythm, did not stop. Soft pause, faint sound of wind through open hills, distant echo of picks, and so, as the emperor's story fades into the stillness of history, we turn once more to what remains hidden, the mysteries that linger beneath the earth he conquered. For in the mountains of Spain and the valleys of Dacia, the mines still whisper secrets of tunnels long sealed, of air turned to poison, and of the hidden wounds of an empire that never truly healed. Let us now descend again, slowly and quietly, into the mystery of the lost mines of Spain. Let us go deeper now, far from marble columns and triumphal arches, away from the open sunlight of the empire's great cities. Imagine yourself walking along a narrow mountain path in the hills of northern Spain. The air is cool, here, faintly metallic, with a scent of pine and old stone. The land is marked by quiet scars, shallow depressions, and collapsed tunnels, almost swallowed by time. Here, long ago, Rome reached beneath the surface of the world in search of treasure. And here, long after the legions have gone, the earth still keeps its secrets. This is the story of the lost mines of Spain. Vast, dangerous, and astonishingly sophisticated works of engineering, now half buried under centuries of silence. The earth beneath Rome's feet. The Roman Empire was built not only on conquest and law, but on what lay beneath the ground. Gold, silver, lead, and copper, these were the veins that fed the imperial heart. Without them, there would have been no coinage, no weapons, no grand temples gleaming in sunlight. In the distant provinces of Hispania, the Romans found an abundance of all these things. The land, once inhabited by Celtic and Iberian tribes, hid vast mineral deposits. From these mountains came the metals that built Rome's armies and adorned its emperors. And among these, one region became legendary, Las Medulas, the great gold mines of the Northwest. Even now, when you stand there, the landscape looks unnatural. Deep red cliffs rise like frozen waves. Narrow tunnels twist into the hills, some too small for a grown person to pass through. The silence is almost total. Only the sound of distant wind and the occasional fall of a stone from the eroded walls. Yet once, this place rang with the sound of hammers, picks, and rushing water. Las Medulas, Rome's hidden giant. In its prime, Las Medulas was the largest open-pit gold mine in the Roman world. It operated for more than 2 centuries, producing an unimaginable volume of precious metal. And the methods used there were unlike anything else in antiquity. The Romans called it ruina montium, the wrecking of mountains. They used water as their weapon, harnessing it with astonishing precision. Engineers carved aqueducts stretching for miles across valleys and ridges, bringing torrents from distant rivers. When released, the water tore through the rock and soil, collapsing entire hillsides in a controlled flood. Gold-bearing sediment was then washed through wooden sluices, the heavier metal settling at the bottom. Imagine it, thousands of workers moving in rhythm, digging channels through the red earth, while others directed the floods with shouted orders that echoed across the slopes. Each torrent was both a tool and a danger. If a tunnel flooded too soon, men inside might never emerge again. If the aqueduct cracked, entire weeks of work could be lost. The landscape itself became a machine, a living, breathing engine of extraction, designed to tear apart the mountains and wash their riches clean. The workers below, who were the people who worked in these mines? Not Roman citizens, not soldiers or engineers, but the enslaved and condemned. They were prisoners of war, debtors, and those sentenced to labor by the courts. Some were men who had once fought against Rome. Others were born into servitude, their fates decided before they ever saw the light of day. Their days followed a rhythm of exhaustion, a rhythm that did not end. They descended before dawn into tunnels that were narrow and unlit, their breath mingling with dust. The air grew thin the deeper they went, and the walls, damp and cold, pressed close on every side. Sometimes they carried baskets of ore on their backs, climbing endless steps carved from rock. Sometimes they worked the sluices under the open sky, wading through freezing water that bit at their skin. The noise was constant, the scraping of picks, the crack of collapsing stone, the hiss of water through channels. And yet, in that noise, there was monotony. The same movement, the same sound, hour after hour, day after day. Their world was dark and damp, lit by the faint glow of oil lamps and the memory of sunlight. Many did not survive long. The mines were as much prisons as workplaces, and in some ways, more final. Life around the mines. Yet, even here, life continued in its strange rhythm. Around the mines grew small settlements, wooden huts, simple shrines, and marketplaces where food and tools were traded. Roman overseers kept watch, ensuring the quotas were met. Some families lived nearby, their lives tied to the mine's pulse. Children growing up in the shadow of machinery they could never escape. The air would have been filled with the mingled smells of smoke, sweat, wet earth, and the faint sweetness of pine. At night, when work finally stopped, the hills fell quiet again. Only the sound of crickets and the distant murmur of the aqueduct remained. Fires flickered outside the huts, small and fragile against the immensity of the mountain. And perhaps, now and then, a worker would look up from his bowl of course, gazing at the stars above, wondering how far away Rome was and whether the gold he had helped to unearth would ever bring him closer to freedom. The vanishing of the mines over time as the empire aged. The gold began to run thin. The channels silted up, the aqueducts cracked, and the tunnels grew too unstable to enter. By the 4th century, most of the great mines of Spain had fallen silent. The workers were gone. The settlements emptied. Nature slowly began to reclaim what man had torn apart. But the earth remembers. Even now, beneath the quiet forests, archaeologists find traces of the Roman machinery, the carved channels, the piles of stone tailings, the fragments of tools left where they last fell. Some tunnels still lead deep into the hills, their entrances hidden by ivy and thyme. Inside, the air grows cold and still, and the walls glimmer faintly with mineral veins that once drew the might of an empire. Many of these tunnels remain unexplored, too fragile to enter, too vast to map. They are the empire's buried memory, a reminder of how far Rome was willing to go to sustain its appetite for wealth. Echoes in the earth. It is said that even centuries later, shepherds wandering through the hills would stumble upon strange openings in the ground. The mouths of old shafts half collapsed, breathing out a faint, cold air. Some swore they heard whispers within, as if the earth itself were murmuring the labor of those long lost. Archaeologists and explorers who have entered these forgotten places speak of eerie stillness. The walls cut smooth and narrow, the faint marks of picks still visible in the stone, and the sudden, complete silence when the last echo fades. No birds sing underground. No wind passes through. Only the steady drip of water and the sense that you are trespassing on something that does not wish to be disturbed. There is mystery here, not of treasure, but of absence, of how something so immense, so vital to Rome's survival, could vanish so completely from memory. Toxic legacies. In recent decades, scientists studying the region have found that traces of Roman mining still linger in the soil and water. Mercury, used to extract gold, has seeped deep into the earth. Lead dust remains trapped in river sediments. Even now, nearly 2,000 years later, the residue of empire can still be found in the streams and the roots of trees. It is a strange continuity, the past, literally embedded in the landscape, its poisons carried forward quietly through time. Yet, as unsettling as it may be, it is also a kind of testimony, proof that the empire's reach extended not just across continents, but across centuries. Rome may have fallen, but its touch remains in the chemistry of the earth. A quiet discovery from time to time. Archaeologists unearth a tool, a lamp, or a fragment of wood still marked by a Roman craftsman's hand. Each find offers a whisper of the human lives once spent here. A chisel worn smooth, a pick broken mid-stroke, a small inscription scratched into a tunnel wall. Perhaps a name, perhaps a plea, but also in silence, in what was left behind. Even as modern Spain thrives above these buried worlds, the mines remain below, unlit, undisturbed, patient, a labyrinth beneath the surface of time. The mines and the empire's illusion in many ways. The story of the lost mines of Spain is also the story of the empire itself. Rome seemed eternal, a force of nature rather than a creation of men. Yet, like the tunnels of Las Majulas, its foundations were fragile, hollowed by the weight of its own need. The wealth that built Rome's grandeur came from the exhaustion of others, from the endless rhythm of picks and shovels in the dark. When that rhythm stopped, the empire's pulse slowed too. And so, the red hills of Spain stand as quiet monuments, not to conquest, not to triumph, but to endurance, to the countless lives that passed through their dust, leaving behind nothing but traces of labor, and the faint, metallic whisper of history beneath our feet. Soft ambient sound fades, the echo of dripping water fades into stillness. And now, as we leave the tunnels and ascend once more into the open air, our eyes adjusting to the pale light of evening, we can turn toward a different kind of Roman life, a life lived not in darkness, like in luxury. For, while miners labored in the depths, Rome's elite gathered in places of comfort, where steam rose, water shimmered, and laughter echoed against polished stone. We emerge now from the mines, from darkness, dust, and the smell of damp stone, into the light of another Roman world entirely. Imagine walking through a city near the coast of the Mediterranean, perhaps Ostia, the bustling harbor of Rome itself. It is late afternoon, and the streets glow gold in the falling light. The air is thick with the scent of olive oil, warm bread, and salt carried from the sea. Somewhere nearby, water murmurs, not from a stream, but from a fountain set into a marble wall. You follow that sound. The stones beneath your sandals grow warmer, smoother, and then before you rises a structure vast and gleaming. The Thermae, the Roman public baths, a place for the body and the soul. To the Romans, bathing was not a luxury. It was a way of life, a daily ritual that blended cleanliness, conversation, exercise, and even business. The baths were where the empire gathered senators, merchants, soldiers, and slaves, all sharing the same flowing water. Each bath complex was an entire world, often spanning acres, with soaring domes, long corridors, gardens, and courtyards. Inside, everything was designed for harmony and rhythm. The steady hum of conversation, the splash of water, the quiet shuffle of feet across polished stone. The soundscape was never harsh, never hurried, a constant, flowing murmur, much like the rhythm of breath. The entrance and the ritual of change. You enter through a grand doorway. Columns rise on either side, and light filters down from high windows, touching the steam that drifts through the air. Slaves move silently among the visitors, carrying towels and amphorae of oil. The scent is clean, but earthy olive oil mixed with crushed herbs and faint traces of incense. First comes the apodidium, the changing room. Here, rows of niches line the walls, filled with sandals and folded tunics. Attendants stand ready to help you disrobe and store your belongings. The air feels slightly cool against your skin after the sun outside. But ahead, through an open arch, you can already see the warm haze of the bathing chambers. It is a strange and beautiful space, intimate and public at once, where the noise of the city falls away, replaced by the soft echo of running water, the warmth within. You begin in the tepidarium, the warm room. It is the heart of the complex, a place to acclimate the body and slow the mind. The walls are decorated with mosaics of dolphins and sea gods, and the floor glows faintly from the hypocaust, the underfloor heating system that radiates warmth through the tiles. You lower yourself onto a marble bench. The warmth seeps upward, gentle and constant, loosening the stiffness in your limbs, softening the memory of cold stone and iron from the mines of the last segment. Around you, men speak in low voices, some discussing politics, others murmuring about business or family. Their words blur together, becoming a kind of living background music, a reminder that even in ancient Rome, rest was never far from conversation. From warm to hot, the caldarium, when your body is ready, you move to the caldarium, the hot room. Steam curls up from the baths, thick and fragrant. Here, the walls glisten, the moisture gathering in tiny beads that slide down the marble-like drops of glass. Slaves pour water over heated stones to maintain the temperature. Every movement is careful, practiced, a daily choreography that has not changed in generations. Some visitors rub oil on their skin, then scrape it off with curved bronze strigils, removing sweat and dust together. The sound of scraping is faint, like the rhythm of brushing sand from a floor. Afterward, their skin gleams softly in the dim light, and the warmth makes them almost drowsy. You notice the way the air hums here, not with noise, but with the vibration of heat itself, as though the room is alive, breathing slowly in unison with its visitors. Cooling down the frigidarium, the pass into the frigidarium, the cold bath, the change is startling, but refreshing. The air grows sharper. The air grows sharp. The marble beneath your feet feels smooth and almost icy. The pool itself is still, perfectly still, until you step in and the surface ripples outward in widening circles. The cold catches your breath, but only for a moment. Then it steadies you, bringing clarity after the heat. You linger there, eyes half closed, watching the columns reflected in the water like pale ghosts. Around the pool, others stand quietly, their voices hushed, their movements slow. It feels like a temple, a place of reverence, not worship. A place where silence itself becomes sacred. Beyond the baths, the feasts that follow, but the Roman baths were not only about bathing. They were centers of leisure and indulgence, and for the wealthy, a gateway to the evening's feast. From the frigidarium, you might walk to a nearby triclinium, a dining room where couches line the walls in a horseshoe pattern. The air smells faintly of honey, pepper, and roasted meat. Oil lamps flicker against painted walls. Scenes of Bacchus, vines, and birds. The soft glow turns everything golden. You recline, as Romans did, on your left side, propped up on one elbow. Slaves bring trays of delicacies, dates stuffed with almonds, olives glistening with oil, and platters of fish seasoned with garum, the fermented sauce beloved by the empire. There is wine diluted with water, poured from silver jugs. The host insists on conversation, not the loud, boisterous kind, but the slow, cool, deliberate exchanges of educated men who take pleasure in ideas. It is easy to imagine the hum of voices mixing with the soft plucking of a lyre. Some guests speak of trade. Others discuss poetry or the movements of the stars. The bath has cleansed the body. Now the meal soothes the spirit. Textures, tastes, and gentle decadence. To dine in Rome was not simply to eat. It was a performance, a ritual of sensation. The bread was warm, its crust lightly salted, the cheese sharp and creamy, wrapped in fig leaves. Bowls of fruit, figs, grapes, pomegranates, were passed from hand to hand. The wine was spiced, perhaps with cinnamon or saffron, its aroma sweet and deep. Laughter rose gently from the couches, not the loud, uncontrolled laughter of taverns, but the smooth ripple of amusement among those accustomed to comfort. For a moment, it was easy to believe this world would last forever, that the Empire's light would never dim, that the same warmth and water and conversation would flow endlessly from one day to the next. Beyond the baths, the feasts that follow, but the Roman baths were not only about bathing. They were centers of leisure and indulgence, and for the wealthy, a gateway to the evening's feast. From the frigidarium, you might walk to a nearby triclinium, a dining room where couches line the walls in a horseshoe pattern. The air smells faintly of honey, pepper, and roasted meat. Oil lamps flicker against painted walls, scenes and birds. The soft glow turns everything golden. You recline, as Romans did, on your left side, propped up on one elbow. Slaves bring trays of delicacies, dates stuffed with almonds, olives glistening with oil, and platters of fish seasoned with garum, the fermented sauce beloved by the empire. There is wine, diluted with water, poured from silver jugs. The host insists on conversation, not the loud, boisterous kind, but the slow, deliberate exchanges of educated men who take pleasure in ideas. It is easy to imagine the hum of voices mixing with the soft plucking of a lyre. Some guests speak of trade, others discuss poetry or the movements of the stars. The bath has cleansed the body. Now the meal soothes the spirit. Textures, tastes, and gentle decadence. To dine in Rome was not simply to eat. It was a performance, a ritual of sensation. The bread was warm, its crust lightly salted, the cheese sharp and creamy, wrapped in fig leaves. Bowls of fruit, figs, grapes, pomegranates, were passed from hand to hand. The wine was spiced, perhaps with cinnamon or saffron, its aroma sweet and deep. Laughter rose gently from the couches, not the loud, uncontrolled laughter of taverns, but the smooth ripple of amusement among those accustomed to comfort. For a moment, it was easy to believe this world would last forever, that the empire's light would never dim, that the same warmth and water and conversation would flow endlessly from one day to the next. The contrasts beneath the surface, but the baths and the feasts were sustained by unseen hands. The labor of those who heated the furnaces, carried the firewood, fetched the water, and tended to every small need of the guests. Behind the marble walls were narrow corridors where slaves moved in silence. You could not hear them from within the grand halls, but their rhythm was constant, feeding the fires, cleaning the floors, refilling the oil lamps. Just as the empire's wealth had been carved from the mines, its comfort was maintained by invisible effort. It is a gentle reminder that history's calm surfaces often rest upon deep, unseen motion, that even in Rome's golden age, the warmth of one world depended upon the toil of another. A moment of reflection. As the feast winds down, the lamps burn lower. The guests' voices fade to murmurs. Outside, the city hums softly, the creak of cartwheels, the distant splash of water in fountains, and the sigh of wind through narrow streets. You step once more into the night. The air feels cooler now, scented with a faint trace of smoke and sea. Above, the stars stretch wide and patient. The same stars that shone over the mines of Hispania, over the legions on the Rhine, over the slow rise and fall of 1,000 Roman knights. The baths, the mines, the feasts, each a reflection of Rome's vast and intricate rhythm, its ability to hold light and shadow in the same breath. And you can almost feel it still, that pulse, faint but steady, running through the centuries. The long exhale of Empire Rome, like all great civilizations, moved to its own slow cadence. The baths filled and emptied. The mines opened and collapsed. Generations were born, worked, and faded away. And yet, through it all, life continued, rhythmic, repeating, eternal in its ordinariness. Perhaps that is what draws us to these ancient worlds, the sense that beneath the grand stories and shining marble, people simply lived, ate, laughed, rested, worked, and dreamed as we do now. The empire has gone, but the quiet sounds remain in imagination. The drip of water, the crackle of firewood beneath the baths, the whisper of wind over red Spanish hills. And in those sounds, we can still find a kind of peace, a reminder that even amid hardship and decay, there was beauty, ritual, and the simple comfort of the familiar. The narrator's tone softens, slowing further as if settling into rest. And now, as the last oil lamp flickers out, the baths fall silent. The water grows still. Only the faint scent of steam and olive oil lingers in the air. You close your eyes. The warmth of the room fades into the warmth of sleep. The empire, for now, is quiet. The long march of history continues without hurry. You are safe. The story is done for tonight. Let the sounds of the past drift away and rest, knowing that even in the deepest darkness of the mines or the softest light of the baths, the rhythm of life, calm, enduring, and human remains. And so, the day in Rome draws to an end. The furnaces beneath the baths have cooled. The lamps along the marble corridors flicker once, then settle into quiet darkness. Somewhere beyond the city walls, a slave banked the last embers of the fire that had kept the caldarium warm. Somewhere else, a miner in Hispania turns in his sleep, his lungs heavy with dust, dreaming, perhaps, of the sea he will never see again. The empire is resting now. Its breath, once loud and bright, has slowed to a whisper. The rhythm of labor and leisure. Across the centuries, we can still sense its rhythm, the constant movement between work and rest, light and dark, toil and ease. The miner's hammers struck in time with the heartbeat of the empire, and that same pulse was felt in the laughter of feasts, in the soft rustle of linen at dusk. Every civilization moves to this rhythm, the rhythm of human endurance. And if you listen closely, not with your ears, but with something quieter, you can almost hear it still. A pulse beneath the silence. The sound of countless lives once lived in patterns we can only imagine. Time, as a slow river history, in the end, is like a slow, patient river. It carries everything with it, the shining stones of victory and the darker silt of suffering. It does not hurry. It does not rush to judgment. It simply flows, smoothing edges, carrying fragments, turning them over and over until only memory remains. The Roman Empire has long since fallen. Its baths are ruins, now broken walls open to the sky. Pools filled, not with water, but with wind and wildflowers. In Spain, the mines are quiet too. The tunnels still stretch into the hills, but no one works there anymore. Only the faint scent of metal remains, and the memory of fire and sweat that once gave Rome its wealth. The river of time has moved on, but the echo of those lives lingers, gentle as a breath against the stone. The comfort of distance, it is comforting, in a way, to remember that these things are long past, that the pain of those miners, the pride of those emperors, the luxury of those feasts, all of it has become faint, distant, softened by time. We can visit it safely now, as one might trace a finger across the surface of a calm pond, seeing the ripples, cueing the coolness, but untouched by the depth below. History gives us that gift, to see the vastness of human experience without needing to live its pain again. To drift among its memories as one might drift towards sleep, curious but calm. Echoes of ordinary lives. Think for a moment of those who were never written about, the miner who sang softly in the dark to steady his breath, the bath attendant who polished marble steps every morning, the woman who sold figs at the gates, her hands sticky with honey, the child who listened, half asleep, to the splash of fountains outside. They lived and worked and rested just as we do. They woke to the same dawn light and fell asleep to the same slow rhythm of the world turning. Their names are gone, but their days, those small, quiet moments of living, remain in the echo of stone and soil. In a sense, history never truly disappears. It simply grows still, like a candle whose flame has gone out, yet whose warmth lingers in the air a little while longer. The gentle weight of the past as you lie here, listening, breathing. Perhaps you can feel that same stillness settling over you now. The weight of history, not heavy, but comforting. The knowledge that people before you have worked, endured, and finally rested as you will now. Their stories are woven quietly into the world you inhabit in every stone city, every flicker of lamplight, every sip of water. And just as they did, you have earned your rest. The night over Rome, above the ruins of Rome, night deepens. The Tiber flows silently beneath the bridges, its surface glimmering with the faint reflection of starlight. Somewhere, an owl calls soft and low. The air cools, and the marble breathes out the warmth it has held through the day. The city that once ruled the world now sleeps like any other. And in that quiet, you can almost hear the whisper of centuries, the sigh of miners, the murmur of bathers, the laughter of diners fading into the hush of time. All of them resting now. All of them part of the same endless story of endurance and, finally, of peace. A slow descent into sleep. Let your thoughts drift now as the past drifts into darkness. There is no need to hold on to names or dates or battles. Just the feeling, the calm hum of water, the warmth of stone, the weight of time settling softly over everything. Breathe in, slowly, and out again. The story is over, but the stillness remains. You have walked through the mines, stood in the baths, feasted beneath painted ceilings, and now you have returned, safe, quiet, at rest. Let the world fade around you. Let sleep take you as gently as a tide coming to shore. For tonight, the empire is still. The lamps are out. The water has gone calm. And all that remains is the sound of your own slow breathing in rhythm with the timeless silence of history.